Okay, so we have about a couple of minutes to get started. I hope you're all getting ready to join us on the live event today on the topic of service management mentoring. So we'll give a couple of minutes for people to join in, and then we will get started. So people, as you start logging in, please post your questions if you have any, as we start taking up questions on either on Twitter or on the Facebook chat window itself. So Matthew Burrows says that he's here to see what color Stuart is wearing today. So you've been talk of the town, Stuart. So we'll see what Stuart has to wear today, and we'll get through it. Okay, so we are looking at getting ourselves into the ultimate post now, and we are right now ready to get kick-started at this element of service management mentoring. Okay, so last 30 seconds before you can all join in. Yes, we are on top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us in this edition of live event on a topic which is very close to my heart, called service management mentoring. So I was actually debating on who should I have as part of the guest today, and within a few minutes, I had one person in my mind whom I have had a lot of respect over the years, who has managed big programs of service management mentoring, to come on this and tell us his version of what does service management mentoring means. So please join me in welcoming Stuart Rance, who is the owner of the Optimal Service Management and lead author and examiner for ITIL 4, joining us today from the United Kingdom. Thank you so much, Stuart, for joining us today, and I hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Thank you, Suresh. It's a pleasure to see you.
Excellent. So for viewers, Stuart, why don't you give you a rundown lane of your historical experiences in IT and related works that you have done for more than 2 to 3 decades?
Oh my goodness, that's a real challenge, isn't it? I started working in IT as a hardware engineer, mending teletypes and VDUs, and progressed from that to mending servers and systems and disk drives the size of a washing machine at the time. And then from there, I got into system support and second and third level support on all sorts of systems. And from there, I got into software support and a small amount of software development. And I guess that covers the first 15, 20 years of my career in IT. And then I started noticing how much difference it made to my customers, whether they were doing things like incident management and problem management and change management. And that seemed to make a bigger difference to them than the technology they were using. So I switched across into doing service management support. And then I picked up a bit of information security stuff. And somewhere along the way, I started writing and teaching. So I both write and teach ITIL stuff. And I'm a lead examiner for ITIL. And I'm a certified information systems security professional. And I used to teach that as well. I'm not teaching it anymore at the moment, far too hard. And that roundabout gets us up to date.
Excellent. Thanks, Stuart. So kicking on for this topic of mentoring, and give us a little bit of background around your experience around mentoring, and why is mentoring an important aspect in service management? And I mean, we've all grown from service management part of it, and the question is, do we really need mentors? What is your take on that?
I guess mentoring isn't uniquely important to IT service management.
Right.
It's important in any role in life, both career and personal.
Right.
You know, I brought up 3 kids. Can't say I did a perfect job of it, but if I'd had to do that without taking the opportunity of speaking to people who'd done it before and asking them what had worked for them and what hadn't worked for them, and pointed out things my kids were doing and asked them what they thought of it and that's how human beings learn. You know, we don't learn Well, yeah, some of us learn from reading books. I love reading books to learn, but you can't observe yourself by reading a book, and you
Right.
can't bounce your ideas off a book.
Right.
And you can't see your own weaknesses from reading a book. Sometimes you actually need to talk to a trusted human being,
Right.
and bounce your ideas about, and have somebody look in from outside who's not going to judge you, but is simply going to offer you honest feedback on what you're doing and what other things you might want to try.
Right.
And as I said, I use the example of bringing up my kids because I suspect a lot of people will have done that, whether they work in IT service management or not.
Right.
But it applies to any walk of life, whether you do sports or just existing as a human being.
And will you kind of, the problem happens is that how do you find a good mentor? How do you know what is a mentor whom we should pick it up? Should it be locally within your own organization, or should it be going out of your organization? What's a sweet spot look like?
I almost don't want to answer that yet, Suresh. And the reason is, before I can go there, I need to talk about something different. And that is, why do you want a mentor?
Right.
There's a lot of different reasons you might want a mentor. And until you know what it is that you're trying to achieve, what sort of understanding or development you're looking for help with, I can't tell you where to look for a mentor.
Right.
It might just be somebody within your family. It might be somebody who works for your organization. It might be somebody in your industry in a different organization. It
Right.
might be somebody in a completely different industry. It might
Right.
be somebody who works in the same country as you,
Right.
and therefore is familiar with your culture. It might be somebody who works on the other side of the globe and has a better global perspective. It really does very strongly depend on what it is that you want to get out of the mentoring.
Sure.
And often it can be wise to have more than one mentor. And they don't all have to be kind of official, formal, written down so many hours per week type of mentoring relationships. Some might be, but some might be terribly informal, the people you chat to,
Right.
who help you to see something about yourself that you might not otherwise have seen.
Right. That's a very valid point, to understand what do you want to achieve as part of outcome within the mentoring, because it's a broader term. And some people might look at for career progression. Some people might want to look at some sense of direction of where they want to head on. You know, you're always sometimes on crossroads. Should I take this path or that path, the road less traveled, and ask for some guidance to see and set direction towards the right area to go to it. So what are some of the benefits of for mentee? There is a lot of benefits, but what is a benefit for a mentor? I thought the mentor is giving a lot more guidance to the mentee. So how do mentors get value out of these conversations?
So when I have been a mentor, what have I got out of it? I can talk about that very easily. So firstly, I've often got a better understanding of how some of my less experienced colleagues see the world and what sort of issues and problems and situations they find themselves in.
Right.
When I worked for a big corporation, that helped me in developing services and developing tools, because it was really important that those tools were appropriate and relevant to the people that were going to be using them, not to me.
Right.
Sometimes it gave me a better understanding of my own organization. If I was mentoring somebody in a different business unit,
Right.
I would often learn a lot about my own organization, bits of it that I wouldn't otherwise have been involved with. And sometimes that would come back many years later as really powerful and useful learning. Just like the mentee, I built relationships, I built my network. It's funny, isn't it, how when you help other people and you're kind to them and with absolutely no expectation of getting something in return, how often many years later it comes back as a benefit for you yourself, because all of a sudden you know somebody, you've got a network, you've got people you can talk to and understanding of what they do.
Yeah.
What else? I enjoy helping people. I actually get a buzz out of helping other people. It's a pleasure in and of itself.
It is, I think you made a fair point about the joy of giving. And one of the things about joy of giving is about I still remember, Stuart, in the ITSM of UK event, they were asking for people who could mentor the first time conference speakers because they get sometimes jittery about speaking in some of the events. I still
I've done that.
remember you, Daniel, Paul Wilkinson coming in and stepping up. So this is so important because everybody goes to that same feeling the first time that they go into things. And we speak in conferences across the world, but the first one is always special, isn't it? So we want to make sure that we do it right well. I really think that that act of getting that people guide towards that whole episode was really valuable, and I think it was really good.
So let me tell you something that I haven't shared before, I don't think.
Yeah.
I presented a lot of events and conferences. I presented at one yesterday morning.
Right.
I didn't sleep the night before. I was so nervous.
Right.
How many of these have I done over decades? I've presented many, many, many a year.
Right.
And I get nervous before everyone. I am terrified. Will I remember what I want to say? Will I forget something critical? Will the audience be interested? Will the timing work out right, or will I run over or under? I am never going into one of those. Right. So that's quite helpful when you say we mentor people who are new to it. Well, we're not mentoring from we're the experts and we know everything. We're mentoring from we've been where you are, and we can tell you some stories about how we approached it, but they're not necessarily how you need to approach it.
Right, right. And is there a difference between what we call as professional development and career progression for mentoring perspective, right? So do you see categorized this mentoring as two different streams when it comes to professional development and career progression, or kind of both get together?
They can be, and I'll try and explain. For professional development, we're talking about developing skills that might be useful to your current employer or any potential new employer you might have in the future, making sure that you have skills and competencies and experience that will be valuable.
Right.
Now, this is something that I've always focused on throughout my entire career. I've always said to myself, if I have marketable skills and competence, then I'll probably keep my existing job even whilst they're laying people off, as well as I don't care if they do lay me off because I've got marketable skills and competencies and experience. So for me, professional development is all about making sure that you have relevant, up-to-date, marketable skills, competencies, and experience. And for that kind of professional development mentoring, your mentor might be within your own company, might be within another company in your industry, unlikely to be completely outside of your industry unless you're talking about developing skills like presentation skills and networking skills and what have you, where maybe even outside your industry would be useful. It can be incredibly useful, that professional development, to get somebody from outside of your own geography. That's right. Where talking to a global community can help you become a globally knowledgeable, experienced, and understanding person, and that improves your marketability. Career progression within your existing organization, within your existing job, you probably need somebody from within your own organization as a mentor who can help you to network, who can help you to understand where to look for opportunities, which bits of the business are likely to be growing and which bits of the business probably aren't, where the pressures are, where the opportunities are within your own organization. So definitely for that kind of career progression mentoring, I would go internal within my own organization.
Right. And do you have any examples of how you mentored a few people as part of storytelling? Because I see a lot of posts around how much you have helped around. Is there any kind of a scenario that you can?
But it's funny, actually, before I go there, and I will go there, I'll tell you a story. When you posted a link about today's event, somebody I know very well, somebody I think of as a friend now, posted that many years ago, I had been a mentor for them and told a little story, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. And what was interesting was I had completely forgotten about that. It had made a big difference to their career and to their feelings. And it had been very valuable to them, and clearly it was at the front of their mind and had been for a long time. And for me, it was something that happened fairly briefly and was forgotten. But when it came back, I thought, yeah, I remember that now. So this was as we just started to develop ITIL 4 back in 2017 back then.
Right.
And one of the people in the team said to me that he was a bit awestruck by all the experts in the room and the people who had decades of experience as examiners and authors and this and that. And he felt he didn't really belong in the room and didn't know what he was doing there and felt a bit nervous. And a very typical example of imposter syndrome, you know, where you feel that you don't belong. So I told him this story about how when I started as a hardware engineer, I wanted to be a real engineer. I was working for a big engineering company. I was just mending teletypes, but they had people who designed services and wrote operating systems. You know, they were full bore. And I wanted to be a real engineer. And when I looked around me, I could see when I couldn't mend something, we had a local support group, and that was where the real engineers were. So if I couldn't mend it, I'd call up the support team and they'd send out a real engineer and the real engineer would mend it. Well, 3 or 4 years later, there I am in the support team going out to help people. I'm still making it up as I go along. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I usually get away with it by blagging and by, you know, just generally being reasonably competent. But we had a UK-wide country support team who went to sort things out that the people in the local support team couldn't when it was really complex. And that's where the real engineers were.
Right.
Well, a few years later, there I am in the UK support team. And I'm still blagging and making it up as I go along. And I don't feel that I really understand these things, because by then I'd finally worked out the real engineers were actually the people who developed the hardware and developed the software and developed the operating systems. Right. And they were really clever, not like us oiks that just mended it.
Right.
So a couple of years later than that, I was on a training course about the internals of the file system software on an operating system. And there were about 8 or 9 of us on this training course being run by a very experienced instructor. But 3 of the students were actually from the engineering team that wrote the file system software. I didn't understand why they were there at first. And generally, when somebody asked the instructor a question and the instructor tried to answer it, either one of these blokes from the engineering team would say, "No, I wrote that bit, it works like this." Or me or one of the other hackers up at the back would say, "No, look, have a look, it doesn't do what he says, it does this." And I didn't understand why the people from the engineering team were on this course until one of them was asked a question and he looked completely bemused at the person who'd asked him and said, "Don't ask me, mate, I don't do files, I only do directories." And it was at this stage that I understood that the people who wrote all this stuff don't understand it either. We talk about T-shaped and comb-shaped, and well, these real engineers, as I saw them, they weren't T-shaped. They were vertical to a absolute. Literally, this bloke did the folders, but not the files. And that's all he understood. And actually, it was only a very small number of people like me that understood how all these bits fitted together. And that's when I realized there weren't any real engineers. There were just people like me making it up as we went along. And we all had imposter syndrome and it didn't matter.
Correct. No,
and I told this story to this guy and it made him feel a lot better and enabled him to contribute and join in.
Right. No, that's a very good point. So shifting gears in terms of designing a mentoring program, and you've been a part of designing mentoring program in previous organizations you worked. How did you manage that, and how was the experience? And how, I mean, particularly when it comes to an enterprise and particularly to improve the engagement index, how do you make this work, and what are some of the lessons learned?
Wow, this one, it was a lot of fun and it was a huge challenge. And you were there on the team with me at the time when we worked for the same organization. So we had a service management community in that organization of about 8,000 people spread across multiple business units. We had an outsourcing organization, a software development organization, a hardware support organization, service management tools organization. They were all separate business units, but there were people in all of them that did IT service management. And we formed an umbrella community of practice to help people. And we did mentoring, we did knowledge sharing, we did, forums and discussion groups and all sorts of things. So we decided we wanted to do some mentoring, and I sat down with 3 or 4 other people from the leadership team, and we talked about how the hell do we do this? And we found some people who were experienced in mentoring, and we got them to come and do some presentations to us first on what mentoring is and what it isn't. See, that was when I started understanding we're not talking about training.
Yeah.
And it's really important to understand the job of a mentor is not to tell you the answer to your problems or to tell you how things work. Go on a training course for that. The job of a mentor is to stand back, to let you bounce your ideas off them, to let you share your thoughts, and to give you some feedback on how they see you, and maybe tell you some stories about other things that have happened to other people in similar circumstances, not to solve your problems for you, but to help you think through solving your problems for yourself.
Right.
So what did we do? The first thing we did was we put out an email to our 8,000 members saying, we're going to be starting a mentoring program in a few months. We need some volunteer mentors. If you'd like to do some mentoring, please get in touch with me. Tell me your name, where you're based, what sorts of things you do, and what sort of skills or knowledge or competence you'd like to share with other people. We got a fair number of volunteers, and I reinforced this a couple of times until I had enough volunteers, and then I sent another mail out to my 8,000 members saying, right, I've now got a small number of mentors available, so if you want to have a mentor, write to me and tell me why you want a mentor, what you think you'll get out of the relationship. And we'd recorded this session that we'd done earlier about what mentoring is and what it isn't. And we said, make sure you watch this first so you understand what mentoring is. And then I will try and match you with a mentor. But remember, we've got a limited number of mentors and a large number of members, so you might be waiting a long time. And the response was huge. I spent hours in the evenings in my own time on a spreadsheet, matching people manually, because I hadn't given them fixed categories to say they were interested or they wanted to learn about. I just allowed them to freewheel. And then I looked at the mentors and I looked at the requests and I thought, who do I think would match up nicely? I remember there was one Suresh who wanted to help people learn all about governance. And wow, did you do a good job as a mentor? I had a queue of people waiting for you, mate. It was an absolute delight. And it just grew from there, and it scaled up and up and up. And eventually we had hundreds of mentoring relationships going on. We provided some documentation to help people understand a high-level process for mentoring in terms of agreeing some goals, agreeing some timescales, agreeing some ground rules, running sessions, and then closing down at the end and feeding back how well it had worked from both sides.
Right.
And some people would get through 2 or 3 mentors over a period of a few years, and some people would stay with one mentor for a long time, and some would just have one mentor, and then after a few months they'd close it down and they were happy. And the feedback was all very, very positive. It was a delight.
I would say that my personal experience being a mentor as part of this group, I learned a lot as a mentor from the people. And I still remember when you assigned me as one of the mentors for someone who had 25 plus years of experience, I was a little perplexed and a little overwhelmed. I was not sure about whether I will meet that, but it all went well, and we are becoming permanent friends. She wants me to meet them when I'm in New Jersey next time. But it is a very phenomenal exercise that you did, Stuart, in getting this really work for everyone to make it win-win. And touching upon that, one of the things I really learned from you over the years is speaking in conferences and looking at Twitter and social feeds and other stuff, which I think is very fascinating, because a lot of these things were not known to me way back in 2009 when I kind of started off that. And how much do you think is important to get connected in the social ecosystem with everything going virtual these days? How do you think this mentoring is going to help in a virtual kind of a setup on tweets and blog posts and comments like this?
It's interesting. When I worked for a big corporation, as you did, I found the way that big corporation used social media very, very challenging. It reminded me of going to a party and somebody standing with their back against the wall and shouting out their opinions. We all know the person who does that, especially after their 14th pint. And nobody wanted to listen to them, but they were going to keep shouting out what they had to say. And in fact, they had a friend and they were going to get their friend to shout out exactly the same thing at the same time, because it was really important that everybody listened to them. And I tried to explain to the people around me that the way you use social media is the same as if you were in a real social group. You start by listening, you listen to the conversations that are happening around you, then you start contributing to those contributions by saying something relevant to what's happening around you and trying to help and trying to move the conversation forwards. And then maybe after you've been in a conversation for a while, people might like to hear what you think and what your opinions are and what you think is important. But if you treat social media like a conversation, and like any other conversation, you spend much more time listening than talking, then it can be beneficial to everybody. But too many organizations treat it as an opportunity to shout their marketing messages, and that's painful.
Right. And that's true. And how much of things do you think is important as mentors to do storytelling? Because I think somehow it's an art, isn't it? More than a science of storytelling. So I know you are a great storyteller because I listened to some of your episodes in conferences around. So how did you develop that kind of storytelling, and how much is it important for leaders and mentors to provide that perspective to get the point across very subtly?
I'm just thinking back through my own history, and I know when I started storytelling, actually, and this leads back into another service management topic, which I don't want to go into much detail now, but I worked in an organization where there was a very macho culture and nobody ever made any mistakes. And everybody was the big, solid, clever engineer. And I was sufficiently senior that I didn't need to brag and I recognized that this culture was quite poisonous.
Right.
Because nobody's going to learn if nobody ever makes a mistake and everybody always explains what a brilliant job they've done and how clever they've been. And I decided that every time I made a mistake, even if it was tiny, I was going to tell everybody about it. And I was going to walk into the office, and I did. I started walking into the office in the mornings and say, you should have seen what I did yesterday. It was a disaster. Instead of listening to the customer, I just went straight. You can imagine.
Right.
That's when I started storytelling. Interestingly, it took a year, but we completely turned around the culture of that organization so that everybody started talking about what they'd done wrong instead of what they'd done clever. And we all started learning from each other. And it was hugely beneficial. It did take about a year to get there.
Excellent.
And but the point I wanted to make is I started telling stories because the stories had a purpose.
Right. And that's important in terms of looking at it. So in terms of failures, let's talk a little bit about failures, and then we'll come to continuous learning. Today, there is a negative connotation about failures. People want to become rock stars on day one. They want to get to that part of being the best in class. So how do you develop a sense of experimentation and an attitude towards failure as being a sword of honor in the way, or badge of honor? How do you build such kind of attributes? Because today, I think the failure is being beaten to death. So what would you suggest from your experience of how to handle failures, or how to be emotionally balanced when you handle failure?
It's hard because it does depend on the culture of the organization you're in. If you're sufficiently senior like I was, you can start to turn that culture around by just not caring what people think of you for a while. Right. But you have to have a lot of arrogance to be able to do that. It's quite challenging. I'll tell you something interesting that I haven't shared with you before.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good mentor. What do I mean by that? If you give me a formal mentoring relationship, I often find that it's really hard to set expectations, and people want me to tell them what to do. And I don't want to tell them what to do. I want to help them to learn what to do for themselves, and they want to be told. And I've had 2 or 3 really pretty poor mentoring relationships that were set up formally, either within my company or by an ITSMF chapter or what have you, where we just haven't clicked. I've had lots and lots of informal mentoring, which has been fabulous, where I've just gone out of my way to help people, and then we built relationships, and then that's worked very well. As a formal mentor, I don't think I am very good. And I think I've had a number of failures. And from those failures, I've learned how important it is to set expectations really early and to accept that maybe somebody else will be a better mentor for this person. And that's not a problem. It's not a failure. It's, I'll mentor somebody who will gain something from my style of mentoring, and we'll find somebody who's more teachy to mentor you.
Right.
So I don't know. It's very hard to say how you embrace failure, but for me, it's personal.
Right. No, I think completely element of how we doing that. And there's a comment from Matthew, right? I get nervous about presenting to even now. I think it's a sign of wanting to do a good job and help others with the information you're passing on. So
is that Matthew Burrows?
Yeah. Matthew Burrows says, Stuart's experience has often helped me, often informally mentoring without necessarily either of us setting out a mentoring relationship. So it's absolutely fabulous to get this part to do it. So let me share my experience around what I've seen around the mentoring space and connecting. One of the biggest learnings, Stuart, I have had in the last 7 years as I started a company. Before I started this company, I went about in speaking in conferences, and I listened to a lot of these presentations and did a lot of presentations. And that's where my real learning happened. And I could bounce ideas to see whether I to start a company or not. And it became very natural to be a part of the crew, though I felt there was one of the most youngest of the group when I just started off. But the lessons that I learned was so much valuable that I often come to conferences just to meet people, a kind of social gathering and a big ITSM family, as opposed to just going and doing a talk, right? Over the years, I think those those conversations has helped me to bounce ideas whenever I've been in a difficult spot. And I think back to ITSM is one such group attribute to Matthew Burrows to start that. It has been a great channel for people to socialize, bring their perspectives, being vendor neutral, not getting into marketing gimmicks to do that. So there are forums that are helpful for people to take advantage of it, but it's also about on the personal interest of having discipline of doing it. So the advantages of mentoring is being phenomenal because you learn from others, and it could be on conversations, forums about it, but it's also makes you feel humble, because the more I come to conferences, I think how much I need to learn. So it gives
you and me both.
it makes you grounded to find out opportunities that you can and build a system like that. So what would be the future of leaders to create more leaders? Because that's one of the problems that I see, that you don't have succession planning for leaders to create more leaders. So what would be your take? And I've been having talk with James Finister as well in a few of the conversations to tell him, how are we going to get more leaders in your own organizations as we do it? So is there any kind of thought around that?
I'm glad you used the term leaders, because it's not about management, it's about leadership. And you can have leadership within informal communities as well as within organizations, and the leadership can be independent of the management hierarchy.
Right.
Like, for example, when I was the global lead for that service management community we had of about 8,000 people, but it wasn't a formal role. The organization said I could assign 20% of my time to this role, but there were, I set the goals, I set the work, and I got on with it, and we had a fabulous time. And I think that was a leadership role, but it wasn't a management role in any sense. How do you develop leaders? only by mentoring, only by encouraging, only by trying very hard to step back when you could do something yourself, only by recognizing the value of diversity and of engaging the whole of our community, not just the old white men like me. There's lots we can do, and maybe it's as much by listening as by talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last final question for from a mentoring perspective is, are there any resources that you would suggest for people to explore mentoring? Or and you're right that it need not be on service management. It could be from areas, but most of the times people get stuck in crossroads. They don't know where to go and where to reach. So is there a formal area that people can come and spot mentors or look at some resources to build that capability?
If I'd done some proper research for this session, Suresh, I would have a nice, clean, neat answer to that. There is some good stuff out on the internet, but I've forgotten where it is because I haven't been there for ages. I did do a quick check through my blogs because I was sure I'd written a couple of blogs on mentoring, and do you know what? I haven't. And I guess my job next week is to go and write a blog on mentoring that includes the links that you're now asking me for.
Right. No, absolutely. And Matthew says that giving people the opportunity for development, that's spot on, right? You need to create opportunities of autonomy to grow this and make it really memorable. So if you are watching live, please post your questions to Stuart. We are talking about service management mentoring, and mentoring is such a delight. And it's all about giving, and the whole industry is waiting to give you back. And you're right, absolutely, Stuart, that the number of people I have attracted or I've gained over the years in the last 7 years is phenomenal. I mean, I've made global family members across the world in service management, and each and every one is bringing in a real value addition. So I'm pretty thankful to every one of things. I still remember, Stuart, when I came to UK for the first time, you took me along to the entire place of London. We went together to the different places around it. I still have that pleasant memories, having that picture. It was so valuable, and I couldn't really. It was a dream to come and connect with you and talk.
Let me tell you something about that outing. I don't remember if I told you this at the time. My wife came with, and we went for a long walk around London. We, all the way from Buckingham Palace down to Tower Bridge, and I'd known you for a long time. We'd worked together a lot. And as we were traveling on the tube down to meet you, my wife said to me, have you actually met Suresh in real life or just online? And I thought for a minute, I said, I'm not sure. I know him ever so well, but I can't recall if we've ever actually, because we were in an organization where it was so natural and normal to engage online that I knew you really well without ever having, we hadn't met,
right?
But I wasn't sure because we'd known each other so well by then. So yeah, you can do mentoring without ever meeting, although it's hard.
Right. No, it was fun and fabulous to get this ball rolling. And thank you so much, Stuart, for sharing your insights today on this topic of service management mentoring. I hope people will gain access. If people want to reach out to you, what is the best way to reach out for any questions?
Poke me on Twitter at Stuart Rance, right, or join the Back to ITSM group on Facebook, where if I offer an opinion, somebody will contradict it and we'll have a fabulous conversation.
Sure. We'll put that resource around Back to ITSM and your hashtag for people to share insights and ask questions. So let's keep the conversations going. And I hope, Stuart, we will look at some of the blogs coming up from you on the.
I will try to write a blog next week on mentoring. It might be the week after, but I'll try to get one written.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Stuart, and thank you so much, everyone who's happened to join us today and spend your valuable time. I hope this was a great session. I thoroughly enjoyed the session, and you can have hours and hours with Stuart, probably again on a beer face to face. So until we meet next time on the live event, I look forward to seeing your comments, thoughts, and let's get the conversation going.
Thank you, Suresh. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.